Thank you very much for joining me. I am talking right now with the infamous Coffin Brothers. Hard Rock Analyst, if I'm not mistaken, is the name of the newsletter. I've known these guys for 5 or 6 years. They have been quasi-regular guests on our program. They are two of the most knowledgeable, best-respected newsletter writers in the industry. You guys, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
So you know who is who, depending on which angle you're looking at. Eric is the man not wearing the tie, and David is the man wearing the tie. So a couple of good guys. Anyhow, we're going to talk about a number of subjects here. The first one I want to talk about, I'd like to address this to you, David, and the reason I'm asking the question is I really, really don't know the answer to it. Why should I be interested in investing in China?
Well, point one, China is the future of the world in terms of gauging the global economy, but the other reason from a mining perspective is that it's one of the best mineral belts in the world for a couple of things, gold in particular, zinc in particular. Other things will flow out of it. It does have a serious operating cost advantage right now, and that's likely to be sustained for, whether it's a decade or 2 decades while the growth story in the broader economy continues there, but it's quite real. The flip side of that, one of the downsides is it's still heavily bureaucratic and it takes a while to get set up and running. So people have to be aware of that, and it requires a degree of patience while that goes on.
David, I've talked to a number of our colleagues about China, and the opinion seems to be rather split, 50-50. Some people really like it, some people really don't. The reason on the negative, from the negative standpoint, that people don't like China is primarily because they feel that the government could come in at any time and snap up the assets. They're just not very comfortable with the security over there from that standpoint. Comments?
The first issue, and it relates back to my concern or my caution about the time frame to get things done, is there is no the government. Yes, there's a central government. The central government, and that's the one that the world looks to, understandably. They made a decision 12 years ago that they wanted mining funded by foreign capital. They had, various capital sources, various things going on. But they didn't want it to be a focus. In other words, they didn't want to be writing checks to their mining industry anymore. The problem was then, and it was a large problem 12 years ago, it's a much smaller one now, you're actually looking at a government system that is nested in about 5 levels. It has bureaucracies that need to stamp things laterally across all of those levels. So it takes a long time to get things done, and strictly speaking, within a communist system that didn't have private ownership, the ownership of the resources was local, and it was at that local level where problems cropped up. And if you're not cognizant of that, they can continue to crop up. You have to get those people on side. The change over the last dozen years is those people now recognize that central government's quite sincere in not wanting to write checks and won't be writing checks, that within the context of the broader economic expansion, mining's not large, but it's important.
Eric, you're the business guy. I mean, as I understand it, the way you two have structured the business, for lack of better terms, is you're the worldwide traveler, you're the technical guy, you've got a degree in geology, if I'm not mistaken, and you're the business guy. From your standpoint, what's your opinion of investing in China? Would you agree with your brother, or is he all wet?
Well, largely, I mean, I understand the hesitancy that people have. I mean, the thing with Beijing. Beijing is going to do what it wants. Beijing is always going to do what it wants.
Right.
I agree with Dave that what Beijing wants right now is to get as many people as it can that are coming into the cities at rates that aren't even really imaginable to most North Americans or Europeans. I mean, people are coming into those cities about 10 million a month. They've got to find a way to keep the ball rolling and keep the growth rate at 10-12%. It's a number that sounds ridiculous to most North Americans, and I know that some of the disbelief in at a very basic level in the sector and in China is those numbers. But if you look at other Asian countries, that's actually that's pretty much what the growth curve looks like when you hit that part of the curve. When Korea did, when Japan did, when Singapore did, and they have to keep that going, because if they don't, they realize that on the one hand, they want to liberalize things because, you know, they've come to the realization that the only way they're going to get enough wealth creation to keep everybody happy and lift everyone's standard of living is a relatively open economic system. And against that, you do have, you know, basically a communist party that doesn't really want to give up power, wants to be able to control things. There's going to be, you know, at some point there's going to be some friction there. I mean, there already is some, but I don't see Beijing wanting to kill the goose that's been laying golden eggs for the last 20 years.
Well, you know, Eric, that's the opinion that I have on that issue also. You know, the Asian philosophy, we're not actually talking Asia, we're talking China. The Chinese philosophy is very, very different from the Western philosophy, and I know that from practical experience. Both of my parents grew up in China on the one hand, and on the other hand, I was a member I was on the board of directors of a bank where I was the talking Caucasian, and I worked with these guys for 22 years because I was a fairly active director. I developed a huge amount of appreciation, number one, for the Chinese philosophy, and number two, I realized very quickly that their concept of time, for example, is very, very different than ours. So I would have to believe that in terms of the mining industry, what you're telling me about, you know, about the wealth of mineralization over there, they're not going to do anything, I wouldn't think, to jeopardize their standing in the world by nationalizing properties or what have you. I mean, it makes no sense in my mind.